spare a thought for our colleagues stuck in Manchester enduring what is not what I don't think many of us would describe as an ideal destination for the early days of October, but they'll be back soon. Boris Johnson giving his big speech tomorrow in which he is expected to make some repetitive or repeat some really fact-free nonsense about what working from home has involved during the pandemic and during the various lockdowns, but in which he will, I predict, also seek to blame everybody except his own government for the state of the nation. And that's a really interesting moment in any political cycle or in any historical period, because it is, well, I mean, scary, really, is the only word I can reach for, when the people in charge are not responsible for what is happening. And it's a particularly interesting period, this, isn't it? Because I think he'll probably get away with it for reasons that we've explored perhaps on this programme more than anywhere else in the British media. So, I mean, listen, I'm not necessarily after a deep and analytical response to this question, because I'm slightly interested in what is on the tip of your tongue right now. And I can promise you a polite hearing, although I cannot promise you that I'll agree. Do I need to list the shortages? Do I need to list the sectors? So they're looking, as you will know, for 300 fuel tanker drivers, and they've relaxed the visas for that in order to tempt people over from continental Europe. And so far, just 27, I read on the front page of the Times today, have applied, one for each member. One for each European Union member. It's almost like they're trolling us, isn't it? And particularly worrying is the idea that what concerns Whitehall most is the idea that they've taken the political hit for relaxing those post-Brexit immigration rules, but the measures have not proved effective. And that means they'll start blaming the hauliers. They'll start blaming the hauliers for not having people lined up to take advantage of this relatively paltry offer. Which most people close to the issue have warned is not very tempting at all. All you had to do was go to a lorry park in Dusseldorf or Copenhagen, stick a microphone through the driver's side window. And remember, they drive on the other side of the road in continental Europe, so be careful which window it is you stick the microphone through, and ask them what they thought about the offer, or head over to Gdansk or wherever it may be, Bucharest, ask them what they thought about this offer. And it's fair to say you wouldn't have been bombarded with unalloyed enthusiasm. But no matter, they pressed on with it. They took a political hit on the relaxation of the abolition of the freedom of movement, and it looks like it's not going to work, so they will blame the hauliers. They will blame the companies for not having the people ready to take advantage of the pathetic invitation that they have issued in desperation. And that, I think, is the flavour of the moment. The idea that it's nothing to do with us. It's nothing to do with us. We touched yesterday upon the attempt by David Davis, who admittedly isn't a member of the government, but has his fingerprints all over the root cause of all our current problems, or many of our current problems, the idea that it's the fault of businesses that things are going badly. It's the fault, presumably, of farmers that they have started culling the pigs that we discussed yesterday. It's the fault of supermarkets. You remember this odd chap, Chris Loder, waxing lyrical about why he welcomes massive damage being done to the supermarket supply chain, because it means we can all start buying our milk direct from the farmer via the village shop again. So it's the fault of supermarkets that the shelves are empty. It's the fault of haulage companies that the driver's seat is empty. It's the fault of businesses that the supply chain is compromised. It's the fault of employers that they can't get staff. It's nothing to do with the government. Who do you blame? 03456060973 is the number you need. I want to know why, because I think that the government's tactic will probably work, or at least it will work with enough people to be politically effective. And the reason why I think it will work is pretty simple, I think, at 8 minutes after 10. It's because of the relationship between the underlying reasons for these problems and the platform upon which this entire government was elected. Don't forget that you had Lord Frost standing up at conference yesterday morning, trying effectively to disown the deal that he told you on Christmas Eve was absolutely brilliant. This stuff matters. This stuff is really important, because the longer we deny reality, the longer it will take us to fix whatever problems end up looking closer to permanent. 8 minutes after 10 is the time. So, here's what I think is going to happen. I think, for now at least, the possibility that the platform upon which the government was elected being utterly bogus is too big for people who supported it to contemplate. I think the invitation to blame anything except, and well, maybe you disagree with this, but I don't think you can separate this government yet, this vote leave government, from Brexit, right? I don't think you can. I think they are deliberately inextricable. It was why even now, even today, I think he's claiming that his big achievement was getting Brexit done, despite the fact that yesterday the minister with responsibility for it and the man who negotiated the treaty is trying to wriggle out the terms of the treaty that constituted the basis of the claim that they'd got Brexit done. It's mad, right? I mean, it is just mad. It's objectively mad. If this was happening in another country, we'd be giggling our socks off. And indeed, most of the world is currently laughing at us. So you can't separate the two issues. You can't separate the government from the Brexit. And that means that when the government says it's not our fault that things are going wrong, what they're really saying is it's not Brexit's fault. It's nothing to do with Brexit. And if they offer you that invitation, as someone who perhaps has spent a few years slowly realising that, well, no, let's just say you still think I get everything wrong and this lot get everything right, even as all of the terrible predictions start to come true. The invitation to say it's nothing to do with the government, which equates to it's nothing to do with the Brexit, is going to be taken up with alacrity. People are going to buy this. We touched yesterday upon the fundamental contradiction at the heart of this claim, because they've moved now to simultaneously claiming that it's nothing to do with Brexit and it's everything to do with Brexit. So you will start hearing soon people parroting the line, oh no, we need new business models. And if that means things get more expensive, then so be it. Brackets, just don't mention that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg swore blind that things would actually be cheaper, close brackets. So the heads and tailsism of the situation, the heads I win, tails you lose nature of this government's entire modus operandi now moves on to a whole new level. Because when a government is not responsible for what is happening in the country, who is? 0345 60 60973. I joke about Shaggy. I joke about that track, It Wasn't Me, where he is caught in flagrante delicto with the girl next door. But even as his partner observes him tripping the light fantastic on the bathroom floor, he denies that it was him. I mean, it's simultaneously hilarious and quite profound, isn't it? To actually deny the evidence of your eyes and ears, as anyone who listens to this programme or reads a bit of Orwell will know, was the party's final, most terrible command. Here is the evidence of your eyes and ears, and you're being told, you're being invited to deny it. And the fig leaf you're currently being offered is the fig leaf of this is all deliberate. This was all deliberate. So the people who told you that all of the predictions of what was happening now were wrong were actually right. But the people who said they were wrong are now claiming that this is what they knew was going to happen all along. And that's why blaming business is both pathetic and brilliant at exactly the same time. Because think about this for a minute. Let's recall briefly Project Fear. Okay? Project Fear described labour shortages, possible threats to the supply chain of food. It described the possibility of empty shelves in supermarkets. It suggested under Operation Yellowhammer, which was the government's own research into it, they looked at the possibility of fuel supply being compromised and big problems with things like farming, agriculture, slaughtering, veterinarian, butchery, all of the things that are now actually happening. This is incredible. And I honestly, I'm in such a lovely place at the moment in my own head and heart that I've got no beef with you if you're still committed to the idea that somehow it's all going swimmingly or that this was actually what you expected to happen. The point was, everybody who warned that this was going to happen was shouted down by the people who are now in power. I'll say that again because it's really important. Everybody who explained and predicted, from the governor of the Bank of England right through to the head of most FTSE 100 companies and every prime minister this country has ever had, everybody who explained and predicted what is happening now was shouted down by the people now in power. So what do the people now in power do when the stuff they said was never going to happen starts happening? Well, this is where I really hope you can take me by the hand and lead me to a slightly less bleak analysis. They will claim the polar opposite. They will move effortlessly. They will move seamlessly. They will move shamelessly from insisting quite robustly, occasionally even, dare I say, rudely, from insisting that all of these predictions were ridiculous. All of these Project Fear explanations were scaremongering nonsense. All of these people were miserable Ramonas. And now, almost before your very eyes, they're saying, no, that they were right all along. But this was always part of our plan. Take a moment to let that sink in. That's what they're doing to you now. These people, led by Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg and the rest of them. Getting away with it. Not properly held to account for it. Barely even questioned about it. They are going from claiming it was all a load of scaremongering Ramona Project Fear nonsense to claiming that everybody knew that this was going to happen. The people that we derided and dismissed and denied, of course they were right all along. Everybody knew that this was always going to happen, and that was the plan. And if businesses aren't ready for it, if businesses aren't ready to deal with all the things that we told businesses were not going to happen, then that is the fault of businesses. They should have known we were wrong. That's the message from government. Right now, today, 10:15, in front of you, the message from government to British businesses facing unprecedented and entirely unnecessary problems caused entirely by the project that propelled Boris Johnson into Downing Street. The message that Downing Street is giving those businesses is, it's your fault for not being ready to deal with all the things that we told you wouldn't happen. That's Britain. That's Brexit Britain. It's your fault that you're not coping better with all the things we got elected by promising weren't going to happen. I don't think you can unpick that logically. You might be able to challenge it emotionally. You might hate the way you're feeling at the moment, but the government is telling the employers of this country that all of the problems they're currently facing are their own fault because the people that warned the problems were coming were right, and the government that said they were wrong was wrong. It's your fault you listened to us. It's your fault you trusted us. It's your fault you believed us. It's your fault that you are in a pickle, because this was always going to happen, despite the fact that we got elected and swore blind for years that it was never going to happen. And then something, sovereignty, something, levelling up, build back better, slogan, nonsense slogan. That is incredible, isn't it? All of the problems are the fault of the people facing the problems and not the fault of the actual government that swore blind there wouldn't be any problems. So I almost hesitate to ask this question, and I stress that my door, as ever, is wide open. Anybody's welcome, right up to the Prime Minister. I'd love to have a chat. Who do you blame? And honestly, I don't think you can blame anybody except Boris Johnson, logically. But logic plays a very small part in these processes these days, and some days I worry it's getting ever smaller. Who do you blame? Why are so many sectors in this country facing so many problems? You are being asked to blame businesses. Are you going to accept that invitation? 03456060973. Or would you like to blame something else? I only let myself do this 2 or 3 times a year. Who do you blame? It's the polar opposite of what I normally do, but obviously this isn't a programme where you can ring in and blame immigrants or single mothers or unemployed people or poor people or eco-protesters. You have to actually have something resembling a coherent argument for the apportioning of the blame to the person or the people or the institution that you are going to blame. So the cull of pigs, the supermarket supply chain, the shortage of fuels, the labour crisis, 30 quid an hour they're offering to broccoli pickers in one corner of the country and they still can't get anybody to do the job. The farming, the fishing, all of these problems. Wherever you look, there are problems. Who are you personally in your heart of hearts, perhaps, rather than your brain of brains, in your heart of hearts, who are you currently holding responsible for all of these problems that Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg and Liam Fox and Owen Paterson and Nadine Dorries and all the rest of them told you would never, ever happen? There won't be any problems. There will only be sunlit uplands, says the Prime Minister. And then when problems predicted by his political rivals occur, it's not his fault. It's the fault of the people who believed him for not being better prepared for the things that he said would never happen. Who are you going to blame? Steve's in Oxford. Steve, what would you like to say?
Hello there. Pleased to meet you.
Hello, Steve.
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody said there would be no problems. I distinctly remember Michael Gove.
Sunlit uplands, Steve. We will be having our cake and eating it. David Davis, that there will be no downside, only a considerable upside. I mean, I could go on. I do this for a living, so it probably wouldn't be fair.
Well, at the end of the day, they are conservatives, and BS is what they're specialising in.
Well, that was a quick retreat from saying they never said that there wouldn't be any problems to saying that they speak nonsense. So who are you blaming, Steve?
Michael Gove, though, did actually tell us he was more honest about it,
right,
and say that there will be bumps in the road, and indeed there are. Who do I blame? I think it's a bit. I think I would analogise it as it's a bit like blaming the therapist or a doctor for trying to get a heroin addict onto detox.
Oh yeah, go on, tell me more.
A lot of pain, so my point of view comes from myself. It's not something that's anything to do with the Conservative Party. They're all crooks. All the politicians are crooks. So
they're clearly not. Mate, they're clearly not all crooks. Some of them are honest, and some of them are doing their best to make the country a better place, and some of them help people.
But yeah. I digress.
You do.
I think.
Could you just give me a sentence on who is responsible for all the problems that the government said wouldn't happen?
Well, basically, we have had COVID. If you'll hear me out, we have had COVID. That's been a big problem. The problems of
the whole world's had COVID.
Shortages.
The whole world's had COVID, Steve.
The whole world also has a truck driver issue.
There is no other country in the world with petrol stations closing due to not having any fuel, or supermarkets not having food on the shelves because of a lorry driver shortage. So let's not go down that rabbit hole, Steve.
Okay, well, speaking of someone who
you can't say that politicians are all liars, Steve, and then reveal that you believe them.
No, I don't. I believe in my own opinions. I believe in reading The Sun.
Yeah.
I believe in reading The Guardian.
Okay.
I believe in reading The Independent. I believe in reading The Daily Mail.
Well done.
I believe in then using my brain.
Yes.
Drawing conclusions, because I know that all sides will give their own version, They all have their own.
So what's your version? Why are all the problems, or who is responsible for all the problems that the government said wouldn't happen?
Okay. Well, first of all, as I was trying to say, as someone who's lived in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland for the last few years, the problems of truck drivers and labour shortages are not common only to the UK.
Yeah, but we've already been down this road, mate. I don't need now to open up my phone lines and say anybody in Northern Ireland struggling to get petrol, because we both know what would happen. Anybody in Ireland seeing shortages in their supermarket.
James, there are empty shelves. When I've gone down my local Tesco just outside of Dublin, believe me, I talked to the staff there,
right,
and they say that they've got problems like with deliveries. They're having issues as well. The truck driver crisis is global. Okay, let's
Steve,
not kid ourselves.
no, mate, listen, you have to stop now, because you are believing the lies you're being told. There is a shortage of truck drivers in all sorts of countries, but nobody else has got petrol stations that are shut, and nobody else has got supermarket shelves that are empty. So I can only give you one more go. Which human beings are responsible for the problems that this country is uniquely facing? Which human beings, Steve? And you can draw on whatever newspaper you please, but I insist on an answer.
Right. The petrol station crisis didn't exist about 10 days ago or so.
Which human beings are responsible for the unique problems in the United Kingdom, Steve?
Basically, the media, the Sky News,
last chance, Steve,
decided to start telling us that 10 petrol stations out of several hundred.
No, that was BP, Steve.
Closed.
That was BP that revealed that they'd closed 20 petrol stations.
Decided to make great hay of that.
No, Paul Scully came forward and told people not to panic buy.
No, because we all know, James, that if you say that there is a crisis, even just talking about...
Right, so we're blaming the government. We're blaming the business minister. Is it the business minister, Paul Scully, and the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who said, don't panic buy, therefore it's their fault?
Well, you shouldn't panic buy.
OK, Steve, I've done my best, mate. Can I just do a little guess on how you voted in the referendum? Would that be unfair?
No, let me finish my point.
No,
please.
Steve, you've had 10 minutes, mate, and you haven't got a point. Can I just have a little guess how you voted in the referendum?
If you're barracking me, that's very rude.
It rhymes with your name, Steve. It rhymes with your name, doesn't it?
No.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what I voted.
I'd just like to know, please.
On this instance of the tanker crisis, right? It was, if you tell people that there is a problem with getting petrol, they will panic buy. We know this because it happened last year with the toilet rolls, James. We all know this. You only have to put the word out, and it happens. 10 petrol stations, 12 possibly, out of how many 100,000 petrol stations in the country?
It's 27 minutes after 10. Tim's in Colchester. Tim, which human beings are responsible for the unique problems that this country is currently facing?
Hello, James. It makes a change for us to talk on a Tuesday rather than a Thursday after 12 o'clock.
Well, it's still mystery hour, mate. Carry on. It's mystery week at the minute. And we are a little short of time because I gave Steve rather more than is ordinarily available on a radio phone-in programme. But hey-ho, we live in hope. What would you like to say?
Well, the government, it's a government that sets the environment for how the news is formulated, and it's a government that sets the agenda. So personally, you and I are in complete agreement about where the blame lies. The thing that I just wanted to mention was I heard the Prime Minister talking earlier about how businesses should do more training and how it was all the responsibility of businesses, that the fact that we supposedly have a low skill economy, and I was incandescent with rage.
Why?
Because before I got into the wine business, I used to work in HR and training, and I did a lot of work with government programs, and I still follow some of it. And training is the first thing that the government cut under austerity. You look into sort of trying to get help to get things like, if you're talking about things like an HGV license or something like that, there's no help from the government at all. So for them to talk about, we need to have a high-skill economy. Yes, we do need to have a high-skill economy, but they've done absolutely nothing.
If we've got a high-skilled economy, who does the unskilled jobs?
Well, there's that as well. But if they're talking about a high-skilled, high-wage economy, you've got to set the environment. You've got to set the ground.
But who will do the unskilled jobs?
Well,
full Perry Mason mode today. I'm badgering all the witnesses because, the training is ridiculous. The problems they said aren't going to happen are happening. They're trying to blame it on businesses for not being better prepared. If we train everybody to be a brain surgeon, who's going to drive the ambulances?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? It's about where you sort of put the skills base.
And finally, do you think it's going to work? Steve, perhaps not representative of a huge constituency, but an existing constituency nonetheless, can't really explain why it's not the fault of the government, but absolutely convinced that it's not the fault of the government. Do you think that is going to work? The shaggy approach.
Sadly, I think it may well work because it's another one of these occasions of throwing so many lies at the wall, and enough of them will stick, and it becomes so difficult to scrape them off the wall with fact checking that it's going to be there.
Well, the facts don't really matter, as we've established earlier this week, when a photograph of a supermarket in Belgium that was a victim of industrial action at a warehouse and therefore couldn't fill its shelves was held up by various members of the right-wing media of evidence of shortages everywhere. And the line that there are shortages everywhere is being punted by the government. Don't speak to anybody in the countries that apparently have these comparable or identical shortages, because they'll just tell you that they don't. But it doesn't matter, because, and that's why the way that the vote was cast in 2016 is relevant to these positions, because if you step back and begin to wonder whether the people that you thought were metropolitan elite Ramonas or Project Fearmongers or whatever it was, you step back and realise they were actually right, where do you go next? And just, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but all of my listeners in Ireland, you do not need to tell me that you don't currently face any of the shortages that we're facing in the United Kingdom. I know that. That is the fact of the matter. But feelings lead people to very strange places. They lead people to places where Michael Gove never said in April of 2016, the day after we vote to leave, we hold all the cards and we can choose the path we want. So Off the top of my head, we're already culling pigs. We talked about that yesterday. The army are currently delivering petrol in the southeast. There are shortages in most or many supermarkets. They're offering £30 an hour to people to pick broccoli and still struggling to find people to do it. We're going to be bringing in our Christmas turkeys from France because we don't have the bodies to pluck and process them in this country. And we've had reports now for 5 or 6 months from farmers telling us that food is rotting in fields. So these are all or mostly problems that were predicted. And the people currently in charge insisted that these things would never happen. They are now insisting that the fact that businesses were not better prepared to deal with all of these problems that they insisted would never happen is the fault of businesses. And I really need callers who can string a sentence together and state with their whole chest that this is the fault of businesses. They've had plenty of notice. What have they been doing for the last 5 years? I want to know whether anybody can put some flesh upon the bones of what appears to me to be the worst sort of political lies. Not just, I'm not going to laugh at you for believing it. I want to believe that you believe it. I want you to honestly think that 5 years spent deriding and denying and dismissing predictions, explanations and analyses that are now coming true were 5 years during which businesses should have been getting ready for all the things that the men and women in charge of the entire country swore blind would never happen. You see the problem, I think. 0345 6060 973. And also an apologies to ambulance drivers, a huge apology. Sometimes I reach for those pithy little phrases and end up misspeaking. But the idea that ambulance drivers are unskilled is not only patently wrong, but it's also profoundly offensive to people who are already facing a kicking from all angles. Because if this nonsense about deliberately engineering a higher wage economy is to take hold, then the first question you'd have to ask is why doesn't the government start with the public sector and give a pay rise to all the people they were clapping on Thursday nights that actually outstrips inflation and leaves them feeling noticeably better off than they currently are. So my apologies. I won't name you all because my inbox is a little bit bonkers at the moment, but I take your point to heart and I apologise unreservedly. 10:38 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and the question is simple. Which human beings do you blame for the unique problems that the United Kingdom is currently facing? David's in Islington. David, what do you reckon?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Oh, you're a little bit feisty this morning, aren't you?
I wasn't planning on it, mate, but you know how it is. You like the blue touch paper, I'd go off like a Catherine wheel.
We've spoken before. I work in hospitality recruitment. Previous to that, I was in hospitality for 30 years. So I've been in and around it all my adult life. Now, I can talk about hospitality the day is long because I know it. And it may be the exception to what you're talking about. And incidentally, we have spoken before. I did vote for leave. Horrified.
I just got a message from someone saying, I'm sitting here trying to work out what name rhymes with Brexit. And then the penny finally dropped. How does Steve rhyme with Brexit? And then the penny finally dropped. So we get there in the end. No, never mind that. We're not relitigating that unless you're still in deep denial.
No. I mean, but there's several points I want to make. First of all, you're pinning a lot of this kind of in a binary way. Hospitality, I'll give an example of this. 1 in 4 job vacancies, pre-COVID, pre-Brexit, 1 in 4 job vacancies for a skilled worker was a chef position.
Yes.
It has always been like that. So
it hasn't. Again, I'm going to do what I did with Steve. I'm going to remind you that although many sectors persist and exist in a state of permanent shortage, they're never at full capacity. Pre-COVID and pre-Brexit, you never read about restaurants not being able to open because they didn't have the staff. And we are reading about that now. So the question is about the unique problems we are currently facing. It's not about what the situation was 3 years ago.
You can't say, James, that the industry wasn't warned. It's always been like this. There's always been the state of...
But the people in charge said there was nothing to worry about.
I beg to differ because I have a business based on it.
No. The people in charge, when they were warned about what would happen if we cut off the supply of labour, the people in charge said, don't worry, we'll be fine.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to defend Brexit, not by a long chalk. And to be honest, Lord Frost, saying he wants to go back and renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol. These guys don't get it because they've never really had proper jobs. I sit down.
He was the chief executive of the Scotch Whisky Association, I believe.
An association, not an actual business.
No.
Not an actual business where his livelihood depended on it. He was an association of a group of companies that none of them were answerable to him. They didn't have to.
He was also a fairly adamant Remainer when he was in that role, although it's amazing how the world turns. Yeah. So, listen, I am being a bit insistent today on actual human beings. So you've mentioned Lord Frost. He's not to blame.
So he can't. This is a fundamental problem across the board. Liz Truss is another one. These people can't negotiate deals. We should have had business people, and part of the other problem is that people who voted Remain kind of forget is that David Cameron said, "I'll go back and renegotiate our position with the EU."
No.
Yes, he did.
No,
yes, he did. And the EU
did.
turned around and said, "Yeah, we're not interested."
No,
and
the EU turned around and said, David, I hate this because I honestly thought these battles were over. The EU turned around and said, you already have by far the best relationship as a member state than any other country in the Union. So we can give you a couple of baubles to take back to Britain, but the idea that you're going to be able to have a unique status denied to all the other members is pie in the sky. And we only ended up in that position because of right-wing media brainwashing people like you that it was actually possible, plausible, or doable. Yes, mate. So what could he have come back with? I hate doing this, mate. Let's not fall out, but I have to ask you the question that I asked 5 years ago. What could he have come back with that would have changed your mind?
David Cameron?
Yeah.
He couldn't have come back with anything because...
Well, then why bring it up then?
Well, for you to negotiate something, you need to have two parties where they can meet with a commonality.
You just said that was part of the problem, so I'm saying what could he have come back with? The fact that he came back with nothing was the problem for you, so what could he have come back with that would have removed the problem?
Back with any number of things.
Go on then.
Which
go on then.
Which Leave we're talking about and gone, listen,
go on then.
This is clearly a popular thing.
What?
So whether it's freedom, in inverted commas, freedom of movement, because we still have freedom of movement, to a degree. I can still go and work in France if I want. Yes. I can still go and work in Germany if I want.
We're talking about why people aren't coming here. So what could David Cameron have come back with that would have removed the problem described?
You actually said this yourself the other day. We were talking about hospitality.
I'm going to ask you the question again and again and again.
Hospitality on the continent is viewed differently to hospitality in the UK.
So David Cameron could have come back with a psychological sea change in how we view hospitality in the United Kingdom. Come on, David.
I don't know what he could have come back with.
But then why is it a problem that he came back with nothing then?
No, the point was, to a lot of people, was status quo or change.
Because they've been brainwashed by the right-wing media and didn't know how lucky we were. And you're one of them, mate.
No, not at all.
So what could he have come back with then?
Well, I've just explained to you.
No, you haven't.
Status quo or change.
So what would change have looked like? What could he have come back with? What could he have come back with?
I don't know.
There you go.
Really don't know. Couldn't tell you. Like I said to you, I'm not going to defend Brexit. I'm not.
You voted for it.
Shambles.
You voted for it. It's not been a shambles. It's unfolded exactly as it was.
How long ago? 5 years ago?
It's unfolded exactly as it was always going to unfold.
No, there were guesstimates. Yes. You could prophesise all you want and turn around and go, yes, this is what's going to happen.
Or you could ask the best qualified people in the world.
On Twitter.
You can ask the best qualified people in the world what was going to happen, and they tell you. Or you could listen to Digby Jones, and you listen to Digby Jones.
No, I don't listen to Digby Jones.
Who did you listen to then? Who did you listen to? Who did you listen to?
I went and did my own research.
Here we go.
That's what I did.
Okay, and who wrote the stuff you researched? No. Who wrote the stuff you researched? Who wrote the stuff you researched?
Again, that we rejoin the EU.
It doesn't matter what I want. I'm interested in what you want.
No, because
when you did your own research, come on, mate. When you did your own research, who were the people that you found most persuasive?
I found a consensus of opinion. So I went across Guardian, The Eye.
Yeah. So what was the persuasive points that you researched? What was the stuff that made you go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'm definitely going to vote for that.
My belief was that we could negotiate something.
But you can't tell me what. That's why I kept saying, what could he have brought back? And you said, I don't know.
We could negotiate a decent trade deal.
So I can't tell you what it is. I don't know what it looks like. I can't actually put into words what it is I thought we could achieve.
We could negotiate a decent trade deal. We could negotiate...
Despite the fact they said we couldn't.
A visa system that works for everybody.
Right.
We don't have that. We just don't have that.
Hey.
But getting back to...
No, we're out of time
now,
mate. We're out of time.
What do Remainers hope to gain?
You can't remain in something you've left. I think we need to bring back...
absolutely, but you keep banging the drum.
No, I told you yesterday.
So what do you hope to gain?
I told you
What's your
yesterday.
end game, James?
Liberty of motion.
Liberty of motion?
Yes, it means that European Union citizens can come and work here. We won't be able to go and work there. But it's nothing like freedom of movement, because we can't call it freedom of movement, because then lots of people who still don't understand anything.
James.
No, we do not. Well, then where are they all then?
They just don't want to come here because the problem is cost of living here is expensive, James.
Oh, come off it. We're talking about people who live and work in Germany, people who live and work in France. Let's not fall out, David. Seriously, mate. Carry on calling me. But when you're ready to smell the coffee, I hope there's someone. I hope there's someone here. But you are still defending it. You're defending the mythical Brexit.
Into that corner. I've asked you what your end game
and I've
is.
told you we need liberty of motion.
So people can get visas.
Not visas.
To come and work.
Not visas. Well, you can give them a visa if you want, but everyone will be eligible for a visa. We'll do it sector by sector. We'll start with the fuel drivers, then we'll do the butchers, then we'll do the veterinarians, then we'll do the healthcare workers, then we'll do the social care workers, then we'll do the chefs, then we'll do the waiters, then we'll do the baristas, then we'll do the doctors, then we'll do the nurses. We'll do it sector by sector and we'll call it visas. By the time it's ended, it's liberty of motion, which is freedom of movement for everybody else except us. And you voted for it. And when you're ready to smell the coffee, I hope you can find someone who will brew it for you. Crikey, where does the time go? It's like the good old days or the bad old days. I don't know. It depends on your perspective, I suppose. But here is another prominent supporter of my liberty of motion proposal, Lord Wolfson, the Chief Executive Officer of Next, who, of course, was one of the few prominent business people alongside the Wetherspoons bloke and the bloke who moved to Singapore to tell you that Brexit would be good for British business. He's written an article in the Evening Standard today under the headline, "I voted for Brexit, but as the head of a FTSE 100 company, I know more than anyone how much Britain needs immigration." It's incredible, isn't it? I suspect there is more consensus than the headlines admit. Many Brexiteers, myself included, have vocally advocated for liberal immigration. Brackets, or liberty of motion, as one of Britain's best-loved broadcasters, James O'Brien, calls it, close brackets. Lord Wilson didn't write that bit, but he might as well have done. While those who want strong controls on immigration do not want a shortage of goods, a lack of carers, or rampant price inflation. And there's your problem. So, who do you blame? Which human beings do you blame for the unique problems that are not only being faced by the United Kingdom, but were categorically ruled out by the people currently in charge of the United Kingdom? And now that we're at 10:52, I suppose I can tell you, if you haven't worked it out for yourself already, this is a philosophical exercise. It's a rhetorical question, but I welcome callers who think that it isn't. Who do you blame for the problems that are uniquely being suffered in the United Kingdom and which were denied, dismissed and derided by the people currently in charge of the United Kingdom? Whose fault is it that these problems are currently happening? It's the fault of the people that the problems are happening to. Say the people in charge who said that they would never happen. Come on. Richard is in Rydlin in North Wales. Richard, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. How you doing?
Richard. Pretty good, mate.
Yeah, good. I'm going to try and come back to your question.
Good.
Because the previous caller seemed to sort of wander around a bit.
Well, be careful what you wish for. Carry on.
Oh, yeah. the human beings that are the most to blame for this kind of nightmare we're in, there are loads, but I'm going to give you two.
Yeah.
Number one is David Cameron for calling the referendum in the first place. I don't think we should have ever had a...
No, I take that. I suppose I now say we could have ended up with EEA or EFTA if it was...
It was really, he was trying to solve a kind of internal Tory party psychodrama over Europe, which has rumbled on for so long.
Yes.
So I'm blaming him.
Okay.
And secondly, I'm blaming Nigel Farage, or should I say Farage?
Who?
Yeah, exactly. That bloke.
Yes.
The amount of airtime he got, the lies he was allowed to get away with, the out-and-out racism, that awful poster. And sadly, so many people in Britain fell for it.
Yeah.
So those are the two individuals I'm going to give you. If he'd never called the referendum in the first place, i.e. David Cameron, we wouldn't be in this mess. Secondly, if Nigel Farage had not been given so much time to spread his poison and lies, 52% of those who voted would have voted that way.
Wouldn't have got over the line. Well, I mean, you say that, and far be it from me to defend either of the men that you've mentioned, but there were an awful lot of people who saw exactly what you saw and decided to stay on that side of the river.
Well, you know what? I'm blaming myself as well, because in 2015 and 2016, I didn't do enough to tell friends and family about what a mistake leaving would be.
No one knew. No one knew for sure.
That's why we shouldn't have had a referendum in the first place.
Yeah, but then, as you say, Cameron's existential defence of the Conservative Party, there's a lot going on. So anyway, you criticise David for going around the houses. You haven't really addressed the direct question. You're essentially apportioning blame. No, you have not. How dare you?
Two human beings.
I know they're human beings. I'm not disputing the fact that they belong to the species. I'm disputing the fact that they bear personal responsibility for the specifics of the current catastrophes. No, they bear personal responsibility. No, I know, but you've gone back to basics. You've gone back to roots. You've gone back to the source.
No, but you have to go back.
But why? Why is the army delivering petrol? Well, it's not Nigel Farage's fault. The poor fella got rear-ended by a van the other day after he was driving around Kent looking for some petrol stations.
It partly is Farage's fault, though, because if we hadn't left the European Union, then we wouldn't have people driving petrol things around because we're in such a state.
The chairman of Vote Leave, joint chairman, were Michael Gove and Boris Johnson. Why aren't they on your list?
Well, they are, but you've only got a short programme. I mean, there are hundreds of people on the list, but you asked for two human beings. Well, no, you didn't ask for two, but you asked for human beings. I could go on forever. Daniel Hannan, shall I bring him into it?
He's a lord now. Remember, know your place, please. Tug your forelock. He's a member. He's a peer of the realm.
David Davis, Mark Francois, you know,
all the greats.
Doris,
Happy days.
You know.
And where are they now? They're all mostly in quite bigger positions, more senior positions than they were in before, claiming that all the problems they said would never happen are somehow the fault of other people. And that's the psychological trick that I just, even after all these years, I still can't believe it works. I still can't believe it works.
Well, it did, didn't it? And that's where we are because of what happened in 2016.
Well, I'd be a little bit disingenuous of me to dispute the meat of your contribution, but I think in the interest of fixing these problems, I'm more interested in identifying who's responsible for them in the immediate context, because we cannot get in a time machine. We cannot have another referendum. We cannot rejoin the European Union. So working out why we're culling pigs, why the army is delivering petrol, why there are shortages in supermarkets, why they're offering 30 quid an hour to broccoli pickers and still struggling to find bodies to do it, why we're bringing in Christmas turkeys from farms, why food is rotting in the fields. You can add anything you want to that list. We can't fix it until we know why it's happening. We can't work out why it's happening until we know whose fault it is, and we can't work out whose fault it is, well, until we work out whose fault it is. And it can't go back to Farage and Cameron, much though that particular path may tempt us. Glenn's in Wigan. Glenn, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Cracky. You're a bit hot this morning, aren't you?
Stop saying that, will you? This is what every show used to be like this in the good old days, Glenn.
Oh, crikey.
Go on.
Yeah, I was a union organiser for about 30 years. Now, I worked in most of the industries that have got the shortages.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you go back 15 years, there were shortages then. If you remember, they opened up the EU to Eastern European countries. They joined the EU, and that's when we had the influx of EU workers.
Which the Labour government at the time got horribly wrong in the context of how many people would actually come. But the rhetoric that took root was that it was somehow a disaster to have so many people here was at the very least debatable. It was just never really debated.
Well, we needed them.
I know we did.
We had shortages then. So once you cut off free movement, it's obvious, 15 years later, that we're going to have the same problem. So the people who are definitely to blame are the people like Gove and like Boris Johnson who pushed Brexit and wanted to stop free movement. So this problem was very, very obvious.
Well, I don't know whether or not, if we could actually, I can't get close to them, never mind administer a truth drug of some sort, but I don't know that Gove and Johnson were committed to the abolition of freedom of movement. That, for me, involves introducing a name that has been absent from our discussion so far, and that name is Theresa May. She needed to throw so much red meat to the Leave voters because they knew she wasn't one of them, that when she made, I think it was the Lancaster House speech or the Mansion House speech, and introduced her red lines, recognising that the only way you could abolish freedom of movement was by coming out of the single market and the customs union. That, for me, is where the unravelling began, that leads to where we are today. And she was sort of psychologically compelled to do that by the knowledge of how nuts her enemies were. It didn't work in the end. They still did for her, but that was her attempt to keep them fed.
Yes, but whenever there were decisions were made by whoever the decision were made, the point is that Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, etc., all wanted to abolish free movement.
I don't know if they did. That's an interesting.
Well, that's what they delivered, isn't it?
It's what they delivered.
I mean, whether they wanted it or whether they didn't want it.
I don't think they wanted to win. I mean, these are the interesting conversations that we can't have yet because we're too worried about Christmas.
Once they won, then they had to respond to the people that voted for them.
Yes.
And we've got to be truthful. Most people in this country, one of the main reasons they voted for Brexit was because of immigration.
Well, you say that, but I'm reading Lord Wolfson here. I voted for Brexit, but as the head of a FTSE 100 company, I know more than anyone how much Britain needs immigration.
I used to deal with Lord Wolfson's company,
and
one of the things that he did, or his company did,
I've got to go to the
around
news.
about 2008, 2009, they cut lorry drivers' wages by £60 a week.
I need to check that. I've got no reason to doubt what you're telling me, but I don't have the fact-checking facility in front of me. 11 o'clock is the time. Glenn, many thanks indeed. A little late for the news, but not as late as I have been in the past. It is a remarkable contribution. I mean, it was inevitable, really, when Next revealed that they were worried they wouldn't be able to meet the demand for their products come Christmas because of shortage of labour and I think other problems in the supply chain. But the chief executive who voted for Brexit now essentially calling for a relaxation of our immigration rules. He writes, "My worry is that our political leaders will get so caught up in the heat of the argument that they will miss the solution. Post-Brexit, Britain can have the best of all worlds." He's still not completely cured. We can have an immigration system that accurately gauges the number of workers with the right skills in the places they are most needed and ensures that overseas workers do not displace or undermine UK workers, he says. I'm neatly overlooking the fact that there are many comparable economies on our doorstep that won't be asking people to jump through hoops or justify their presence here prior to taking up the job that they want to do. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. There's another really interesting thing here up in Manchester. Is he the policing minister, Kit Malthouse? Is he the one that said ring 999 if you get arrested? I think he is. He's being interviewed on Good Morning Britain, and I think that Boris Johnson declined to appear on Good Morning Britain. Make of that what you will. The presenters then asked him where Boris Johnson was, and Alistair Campbell and Susanna Reid in the chair today. I suppose Campbell's presence might explain Boris Johnson's reluctance to turn up. Or Susanna's, but obviously Campbell's political colours are well known. So Kit Malthouse, the policing minister, a minister in Her Majesty's government. This stuff matters, you know. I don't like the P word, as you know, because it gets so horribly abused and misused. And as Mark Twain put it, it's often the last refuge of a scoundrel. I think it was Mark Twain. But if patriotism to you means that you want the best for your country, then politicians who are consciously and deliberately damaging your country should be your sworn enemies. And this fellow Malthouse is asked where the Prime Minister is by two journalists that the Prime Minister has refused to talk to, despite the fact that they have a very popular television programme. And Kit Malthouse says, and I think I quote verbatim, "I have no idea where he is." So again, I say a minister in Her Majesty's government, not only a minister, but a minister for policing, an area where you could argue that the truth is more important than it is even in any other ministry. This is law and order. This is the thin blue line. These are the people who we rely upon to deliver justice. And God knows it's a difficult brief at the moment, given the horrors that were unearthed last week. So the Minister for Policing says on live television he has no idea where Boris Johnson is. At which point the camera pans. That's the technical term, I believe, for moves. The camera pans to the left. And guess who's there? Being interviewed by, well, clearly a government-friendly radio presenter? Boris Johnson. So a minister for policing saying live on television he's got no idea where he is. He's within shot. He's within the eye line. There's a lovely moment, actually, that's been picked up by some of the Twitter architects where you can see exactly the point at which Kit Malthouse clocks precisely where Boris Johnson is, while simultaneously claiming to have no idea where he is. And there goes the camera. That's brilliant telly, that, actually, regardless of your politics. I'll tell you now, and I'll tell you for nothing, that takes some real clout. That takes some guts in what we call the gallery, because the possibility of it going wrong, the communication with the presenters, the confidence of the cameraman, the producer giving the instructions, the information being relayed down the earpieces, all of that has to go in perfect synchronicity to deliver a moment like that. But that's not the point, is it? The point is that you have a minister for policing claiming not to know where the Prime Minister is when he can actually see him. He just presumes that you won't be able to. And that is part of the conversation that we're having. I don't know how much longer we're having it for. It's up to you, really. But I am interested, and I know I can't ever get this question quite right, and it always gets a little bit angry, and I appreciate that can be unhelpful, although it is occasionally necessary. I think it's important to remember that as well. But if you're not blaming the people in charge for what's going on, even though they're the same people who told you that what's going on wouldn't go on, who are you going to blame? And is it really that hard to see that the minute I start asking you why you're blaming them, it's going to kind of go badly? Why still cling to this carcass, despite the fact that the people who delivered it to you are already trying to disown it? That's the bit I don't get. Maybe I'm just naive. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. It was perhaps inevitably Samuel Johnson who said that thing about patriotism being the last root. Do you say patriotism or patriotism? Say patriotism. It comes from the Latin, doesn't it? So it'd be no, I like pro patria mori. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori, or pro patriot. Doesn't matter anyway. It was Samuel Johnson that said it's the last refuge of a scoundrel. If it's not Mark Twain, it's usually Samuel Johnson or Oscar Wilde. One of those lovely sort of pithy little epithets that deliver an eternal truth. But on this occasion, I got it wrong. It was Johnson, not Twain. 9 minutes after 11 is the time. Which human beings do you hold responsible for the problems currently being uniquely endured? I don't mean the problems that everyone's had coronavirus. Every country with a big sort of road-based transport system has a shortage of lorry drivers. But the problem's unique to the UK, that the army is delivering petrol. Pigs are being slaughtered on farms, burnt and buried in holes. Supermarket shelves are facing shortages. People like Lord Wolfson, the Brexit voting chief executive of Next, warns that could get worse and extend to other areas of retail. They're offering £30 an hour in one corner of the country to pick broccoli and still struggling to find people prepared to do it. We're going to be importing Christmas turkeys from France for the first time in 30 years, at scale. I'm sure we import some. Food is rotting in fields. All of these unique problems, not the because that's what he's. I think you'll find there are lorry driver shortages in China. Okay, yeah, petrol stations shut, are they, champ? No. So the problem's unique to the United Kingdom. Who do you hold responsible for them? Bearing in mind that the current government contains pretty much every prominent public figure who was prepared to spend the last 5 years looking you in the eye and telling you that none of this stuff would happen. Just like Kit Malthouse looked you in the eye this morning down a television camera and told you he had no idea where the Prime Minister was, despite the fact that he could see him sitting approximately 20 yards away. 11:11 is the time. Andy's in Wandsworth. Andy, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Andy.
Okay, on the risk of being chewed up and spat out...
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I'm a pussycat.
Yeah. Okay, I think everybody's overseen the big white elephant in the room, or forgotten about it, as Cambridge Analytica.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, like, they've just literally been able to target and pinpoint false information and just the wrong information.
But you're doing what the other lad did, and going back to why did the whole thing happen, rather than why are the current...
Well, not really, because they were basically hired by the Leave campaign to literally pinpoint and target, on social media. And I definitely don't. You can't blame the electorate, because they were just literally going on the information that they're given.
No, I agree.
My wife's Romanian. We've been married 20 years, and either the day we went to put our vote in, neither one of us, including my wife, knew which way to vote.
Really?
Yeah, and it's because of the information you're given. Like, I've watched so many documentaries or questions on whether it be YouTube or the terrestrial TV, like Question Time or whatever, and it's literally just so much false information. And politicians aren't responsible for the complete rubbish that they come out with, And
how do you tell the difference between a politician who is looking you in the eye and telling you something they know not to be true, and a politician for either psychological or intellectual reasons who is telling you something that isn't true, but they do actually believe it to be true? And does it actually make any difference? It seems to be a crucial distinction to me. But as I get older and this situation gets worse, I wonder whether it matters.
Well, basically, I think I voted over the whole complete spectrum over the years. I'm 50 years old now. So I voted everything from Conservative to Labour to Green. And I kind of voted Green last time because the only person I ever trust now in politics. I don't believe in all of her policies, but as a person, is Caroline Lucas. Because I think she's a woman of integrity. So for me, that's all it comes down to. Once a politician has lost their integrity, they've got nothing now.
Well, you say that, but they've got all the trappings of power. You can get done for bullying, you can get fired for lying, and end up Home Secretary.
Then that goes back down to what you should probably being a politician should be a bit like a calling. Why are nurses nurses? Because they want to help people. You'd expect the same people to go into being a politician because they want to do the right thing for society. But if they're literally sold out because they've got shares in every other kind of company going, and they're not thinking with their peripheral vision, they're doing what's best for them and their families, and
yet we're an echo chamber. We're just an echo chamber, denying the reality that millions and millions of other people find it absolutely simple to understand. They're not so simple to ring in and explain it to the rest of us. But
it's the same vote going forward now in any election. Well, any election, it could be the Scottish vote for independence or the next national vote that we have. It's all going to be of who hires companies like Cambridge Analytica to spread the more false information, the best.
And that is still
no responsibility.
Grossly under-reported and misunderstood. And among the many, many theories as to why Cressida Dick enjoys political protection on the scale that she does, I mean, everyone's got a favourite theory on why that might be, but the absolute failure, the complete reluctance of the Metropolitan Police to investigate any of the allegations surrounding some of that territory is, to me, unbelievable. And you know what happens when there is a vacuum? How on earth has she still got her job? It fills up with whatever is available, regardless of whether that would turn out to be true or not. Andy, thank you. So, and Cummings in particular, just still in complete denial about the role that it played, because, of course, to acknowledge there was one speech he gave, I've tweeted it a few times, it's still available on YouTube, in which he kind of did acknowledge the role that these Facebook adverts played in the process, the one that your Uncle Norman saw, telling him that the whole country was going to be full of Turks by Christmas if he didn't vote to stay out of the European Union, to get out of the European Union. Cummings can't acknowledge it because he wants everyone to think it was all down to his Machiavellian genius, but you just need to speak to people, and they used to ring me and come out with stuff, and you'd think, where the hell did that come from? How could anybody have ever believed that? Even stuff that the Daily Express wouldn't have printed. It was so bonkers, and it turned out it was being fed into their social media and fed into their Facebooks. And I said to you many years ago, what happens next? What happens next if we don't come down on this properly? What happens next? Immediately, you got Trump. Now you got anti-vaxxers and all that sort of thing. That's what happens next. I dread to ask the question again, so I'm not actually going to. It is, I guess, I mean, in response to the earlier question, I think from David, about what I would like to see, it's probably a little disingenuous of me not to address those questions when they're not being used as a distraction from other issues by callers. That I think Lord Wolfson's pretty close to it. They're going to have to bring back an immigration system that's more or less the same as what we had before, but they're going to have to bring it back for political reasons in a way that they can pretend it's not the same as what we've had before, which is why yesterday's programme's revelation regarding liberty of motion, which I appreciate has a slightly digestive subtext if you approach it from the wrong angle. But that's your fault, having a dirty mind. It certainly never crossed my mind when I invented it. Liberty of motion, which would allow employers in this country to return to the days where they were not suffering crippling shortages and not compelled to offer people £30 an hour to pick broccoli. The full labour supply that they've enjoyed for decades. Downsides to it? Well, it won't be reciprocated because we won't be in the single market, and the four freedoms of the single market include, crucially, freedom of movement of people alongside freedom of movement of goods and freedom of movement of money. So we won't have any of those things, but we will let people in on something similar to the scale that we were doing so prior to the pandemic or prior to the referendum. You can pick your point, your pinch point. But they can't call it freedom of movement, so I'd suggest they call it liberty of motion. I saw something else they nicked off me today. Oh, rats. Someone, you must have spotted it. Something, it might even have been that Malthouse fella, the one who claimed he didn't know where Boris Johnson was when he was sitting 20 feet away. It'd be a bit like Nick Ferrari handing over to me at 10 o'clock in the morning. Admittedly, at the moment, he's in Manchester, so it doesn't quite work. You saying to Nick Ferrari, where's James O'Brien? And I'm sitting there, right? You can't see me because the camera's pointing at Nick. And Nick's I've got no idea where he is. I haven't seen him for weeks. No idea at all. James O'Who? And I'm sitting there. And the camera just effortlessly moves leftwards, ironically enough. And there I am. Amazing. Yeah, what was it they've announced today? It's not the kind of chain gang type stuff or sending prisoners out to... Oh, that was it. Yeah, drug tests in Sloane Square. How many times have you heard me say, if they were really serious about this, they'd be grabbing every Sloane Ranger, every Hooray Henry on the King's Road by the ankles and dangling them to see what falls out of their pockets. And Kit Malthouse has, to his credit, shortly before pretending not to know where Boris Johnson was when he was sitting 20 yards away, has suggested that they start doing spot checks in Sloane Square. It's a largely useless rhetorical attempt to revivify some meaningless war on drugs, but if they were to start stopping posh white kids like me, or at least middle-class white kids like me, as often as they stop poorer black kids in South London, then I suspect that the country's attitude, and certainly the right-wing media's attitude to stop and search, would change in a heartbeat. And remember that because the police can stop and search people with impunity, it can exercise their authority upon the streets of this city without ever really being challenged or often being excused, it opens the door to all manner of possible crimes committed by actual police officers, things that would make the unfair stopping and searching of a young man of colour seem trivial in comparison. 23 minutes after 11 is the time. Nick's in queue. Nick, who are we going to blame?
You've got to blame Boris Johnson for this mess, really. You have to. To borrow from Tony Benn, there is a massive and utter contempt for skilled work in this country. You can go to university and get a student loan. Yeah. Obviously, it's going to break the bank to go and study art studies or media studies, but you can't get a loan to do a HGV license. That's the problem we've got in this country.
Can you not get? I mean, you can't get a specific loan, but you could get a bank loan, couldn't you?
Yeah, but it's not the same payback rate as a student loan would give you. Just
to reel you in slightly on the media studies thing, which used to be one of my favourite bugbears, but these days I just talked to you about the technical challenge involved in proving that Kit Malthouse was sitting 20 yards away from Boris Johnson when he claimed not to know where Boris Johnson was. You do actually need quite a lot of training. You don't need any training at all to do what I do, Nick. I think it would be rude of me to pretend otherwise.
I respect, anyone who does a university degree is studying something at a very high level, but it's just the sort of way that
it's interesting that I'd never thought of that. You can't get is there no vocational sort of loan system in place? It's a demonstration of my privilege that I know nothing about that.
No, not when you. No, so for most working class people, they have to get a minimum wage job. It's how it is. I started out in a factory when I was 16, and you can't save up the money to go and do a lorry license. Members of my family are working minimum wage jobs. They're never going to save $3,000 to go and do a HGV license. It's just impossible. It's just the sort of contempt for skill we've got in this country.
That's a really good point. Is it that much? Definitely.
I looked at it
from
myself,
scratch, as it were.
I looked at it myself. When someone was saying £50 an hour to go and drive a wagon, I'm thinking,
I'll have a bit of that.
That's easy money, isn't it?
You get 30 quid for picking broccoli in Herefordshire.
But it's all right to go and but you go and drive a lorry around central London. My hat goes off to them. I think they're doing something absolutely incredible.
And I'm taking the mickey out of the broccoli. I'm taking the mickey out of the broccoli picking story. But picking broccoli at the rate you would need to pick it at £30 an hour is not something I would actually call unskilled. I don't think I'd be physically capable of doing it.
There are people out there who would do it for that.
I'd be chopping my fingers off. Oh, no, of course there are. They're just.
When I was working in the factory, I was on minimum wage, and you almost, you're working your gut to the,
So that could be genuinely, because it's all gone a bit kind of old school, today's programme, but it's all dedicated to trying to fix problems by acknowledging where they are and who caused them. So a good thing for Boris Johnson to announce tomorrow would be a form of employment loan for people who want to do the training that is needed to get into the sectors that are currently crying out for staff.
It's a late one. I know it's not something that's going to fix the problem tomorrow. You're not going to get $1,000.
I'm going to give you a round of applause. I never reel these out, except there we go. Seriously, because that is what constructive criticism is all about, isn't it? And it seems to me you've just smashed the nail very hard right on the head. I don't like the denigration of the degrees. I know you didn't mean that. That wasn't your main point.
I went to university myself. I was very lucky to go, but it's a sort of contempt that we have in this country. You go and work for Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. The government's like, go for it. Even our current chancellors are, from that sort of background. But if you want someone who's like, Dennis Skinner, former miner, fantastic politician, Boris Johnson, went to Eton, useless. I just find it kind of sums it up, really.
It depends how you judge politics, whether or not winning general elections is your measure of success, or being, losing your seat. I think Dennis did, didn't he, in Bolsover in 2019? I'm not sure, but no, I take your point. If I gave you $3,000 now, how long would it be before you were driving a truck? I'm not going to, by the way. It's not. Sorry, no, I can't. There's all sorts of rules.
I was going to get a check in the post. Sorry. I think it's about. I think when I remember I did my C1 training for this job, and I think it was a good couple of weeks. But you study it over the time you need for the time around your current work and stuff like that.
Of course, yes.
You're looking back maybe 6 or 8 weeks or something. But the higher licenses you go, obviously you need to do each one individually. But you're looking about 3,000, 4,000, maybe even £5,000 for like the.
And how old are you?
I'm 33. I'm getting on a bit now.
Well, Pippa, spare me that, will you? I'm 50 in January. Pippa tells me you can get a 24-plus loan if you're over 24. The terms are the same as a student loan. I don't know whether or not you can get it for the specific areas that you've described, or a career development loan, which will be on standard commercial terms. But you want some
18-year-olds, though, James. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, I take your time. It's very precious.
Pot kettle.
But you've got 18-year-olds literally going to college who are just going to go and study general studies, and when they should be learning how to go and get their car license.
Well, under my glorious rule, they do both. I think that the liberating power of learning doesn't have to be specific and vocational. In fact, I get quite spooked by the idea that there's no point learning anything unless you can actually monetize it and turn it into cash. Most of the most valuable lessons I've learned in classrooms over the years are not monetized. They're not things that I've translated into profit and pay. But so it's not either or, but they should certainly be a lot more or on the question of helping people get the qualifications that they need. And that is something, regardless of what your politics are, that's something we could all get behind, isn't it? That's something that everybody would be comfortable with, until it gets put through the Murdoch mangle, and it'll be, well, why is he getting $4,000 to train as a lorry driver? I didn't get that when I was a kid. When I was a can I have a column, please, Rupert? That kind of thing. But if we can learn to resist that, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're currently in. He says, glancing to his right and seeing David Davis popping up on the telly again, the man who said there is no downside to Brexit, only a considerable upside. And, of course, him and... I'm not going to criticise Ian Duncan-Smith yesterday because he had an unpleasant experience yesterday, so I'm not going to criticise him today. We'll allow him some time off. But the idea of all of these people just popping back up again on all of the same programmes, despite the fact that everything they said in the run-up to the current crisis has been demonstrated to be completely wrong and completely untrue. Oh, hello, Jacob. What do you think about Brentford's chances against West Ham? I know it was last Saturday, but it just beggars belief. I wonder what the rule is. What is the thing you would have to do in order for people in this line of work to think maybe we won't talk to them again, actually, you know? It was Rees-Mogg who said the thing about Grenfell Tower as well, wasn't it? That the people who died lacked common sense. There is no rule. There is no line, actually, is there? If you're a right-wing politician in this country, under Boris Johnson, there's nothing. Nothing you can do. Even Matt Hancock could have hung on to his job if he'd wanted to. Boris Johnson wasn't going to show him the door after he was caught in flagrante delicto with one of his paid advisors, paid by us. I wonder whether there was a time in British politics when looking down a television camera and saying, I've got no idea where the Prime Minister is, and then seeing the camera move 6 inches to the left and fronting up the Prime Minister, would that have been a resignation issue once? I just don't know anymore. And I'll tell you what, if I don't know anymore, I would cautiously and immodestly suggest that that's a bit of a worry. I should probably warn you that the rest of the week's programming may be a little bit lethargic. I am about to move up a gear in my judging of the British Kebab Awards. And some of the the amount of food I'm going to have to put away. As ever in life, I have not responded responsibly to the deadline, and I now have to visit an unfeasible number of kebab outlets at the posher end of the market, as is commensurate with my status as one of Britain's best-loved broadcasters. I now have to visit a slightly shocking number of kebab restaurants between now and this time next week in order to ensure that my judging is both fair and transparent. So if you were to tune in, for example, tomorrow and find yourself thinking, he's sounding a bit sluggish, stroke bloated, then I want you to know in advance that I will be fine once I get to the end of the tunnel. But between now and next Tuesday, I am planning to eat more kebabs in the space of a week than I have since my student days. And if I tell you that there were times in my student days where I ate nothing but kebabs, except for breakfast, that would be weird. You'll get an idea of just how many kebabs I am planning on eating. And there will be of all types of kebabs. There will be shish kebabs. There may be souvlakis. There may be donas. But the point is there will be a lot of kebabs. So I just thought, forewarned is forearmed. Now, I say that with a side order of optimism, just next to the bright purple turnip slices and the pickled jalapenos. I say that with a side order of optimism because Greggs is now warning of increasing cost pressures and the impact of staff shortages. The baked good giant has stopped short of saying whether its inflation pressures would see customers paying more for its food, but it has followed fast upon, of course, the chain of baked good deliciousness running out of some products over a month ago due to delivery issues caused by the lorry driver shortages, the ones that the Prime Minister tells you are happening in lots of other countries where there are no reported instances of vegan sausage rolls or steak bakes not making their way to whatever Greggs' equivalents may be in other countries, but they are now warning rising costs and staff shortages could, of course, impact upon customers sooner rather than later. Greggs has not been immune to the well-publicised pressures on staffing and supply chain, and we have seen some disruption to the availability of labour and supply of ingredients. I'd remind you once again that every country on the planet has faced coronavirus, but only the UK has brought the army in to deliver petrol. How would you feel about bringing the army in to deliver pasties? If that were to become a pinch point, if that were to become an issue, I, for one, would be quite comfortable seeing my tax money spent on training squaddies to deliver steak bakes, but I don't think it's what they signed up for. That's something we haven't done yet, and I think part of the reason is that soldiers aren't really allowed to. A lot of people furious with me for never having had a kebab for breakfast. Obviously, I've had a cold kebab for breakfast in my time, but it's not something I'm going to repeat as a middle-aged adult and parent, as a responsible citizen and one of Britain's best-loved broadcasters. There's no earthly way I'm going to start eating cold kebabs for breakfast. Also, it wouldn't be fair on the judging process, would it? You can't really judge a kebab's quality if you're eating it cold for breakfast with a massive hangover. Get behind me, you peasants, children, ridiculous juveniles. 11:38 is the time. So I wanted to speak to soldiers about how they felt about being seconded into fuel delivery, but I'm not sure you're allowed to tell me. I may ask ex-soldiers, what's it like? I mean, being brought in to drive fire engines during some industrial action when I was a kid. Do you remember that? The Green Goddesses. I presume that was less potentially problematic because it's public duty delivering fuel because the government has underestimated the impact of labour shortages and they foolishly announced that we shouldn't panic buy without understanding the most basic psychology? I don't know. I don't know. If I was a soldier, how I'd feel about driving tankers. I suppose if you can frame it as being for the national good, then it's just part of the job, isn't it? 11:39 is the time. I'll probably take this up to 12, do you think, or not? I mean, a lot of people are really enjoying the good old day flavour of it, but there's not much pleasure in I haven't got the tin out yet. Keith's off today, but I think he's left the tin behind. Mikey's in charge of the tin. I'm not getting the tin out today, but I don't enjoy this. It's just really depressing in some ways. That's why I'm trying so hard to be so upbeat and hilarious. It's really, really, really scary. The people who said none of this stuff is going to happen and were incredibly rude to those of us who said it probably is, not because I had any particular insights, but because I listened to people who I thought did, while others were listening to Digby Pudding-Jones and Andrea Leadsom. Now it's happening, and the people in charge are sort of getting ready, I think, to tell you that it's not their fault. So at what point, this is quite an interesting question, or at least an important one, in the context of Labour, so you've got the CEO of Next who voted for Brexit now saying we really, really need more immigration. You've got Greg's warning of labour shortages. If you were a business preparing for this, at what point did you know what the immigration situation was going to be? Because when Theresa May announced the red lines, there was still quite a widespread consensus that we'd still get all the workers that we needed. We just wouldn't get the ones from Nigel's disgusting poster. It'd be that, you remember that, oh, I don't mean you. Oh, no, look, well, of course I voted for it to get rid of all the immigrants, but I don't mean you, daughter-in-law or colleague or friend. So at what point did employers get a clearer picture? And what the hell could they have done differently? A couple of responses to that call from Q, from the lad who wanted help, really, training to become an HGV driver, estimated about $3,000. Shania is a 51-year-old woman. I know that because those are the first 6 words of her text. And I've just registered to do the HGV driver training, James. I'm scared, but I'm super excited. I've paid $3,000 for it with no help. Simon in Gillingham says, as your last caller said, there are no funds available. I'm also looking into doing my HGV. I'm working and saving the $3,500 slowly to get it done after Christmas. It would be great if the government had a loan type system similar to students. I'd book holiday off work and I'd be on the road in time for Christmas. Do double check, because there's a tension between experience and qualification that we've discussed and discovered on the programme. But clearly, with the shortages continuing, then the ease with which you can move into the job is going to be enhanced and increased. And finally, James, please stop mentioning Greg's shortages. You're going to cause a run on sausage rolls. Oh, God, you're right, Ben. It'll be like Northern Rock all over again. Yes, no shortages at Greg's. Sorry, I misread that. That's a story from 1974. I don't know how that ended up in my inbox. Absolutely no problems at all. So you do not need to go to Greg's to stock up on steak bakes. I don't know whatever gave you that idea. Absolute nonsense. Thank you, Ben. Save me a couple. 11:42 is the time. Larina is in Belfast, dealing with all those shortages. I bet you can't get any petrol. First caller today, old Steve. He was adamant that Ireland and Northern Ireland are in an even deeper hole than we are, Larina. So good luck.
No, we're not having the same. Well, the English supermarkets have some empty shelves in Belfast, but Lidl and SuperValu Dunnes Stores don't. But they planned ahead and they picked their suppliers, and
they're bringing it in from Ireland, and they're bringing it in from the EU rather than bringing it in from the UK. But people knew what they were voted for. Why did you pick up the phone? Which humans are you going to blame?
Well, it's Boris. To be honest, in my mind, it goes from the Nigel Farage, the whole movement up towards Brexit. This identity politics that seems to have enveloped England. It doesn't appear to have enveloped Scotland as much, but it really seems to have enveloped England. And it's almost like the national identity is reliant on Brexit going well. So acknowledging its faults and acknowledging the issues means that something's gone wrong, and they have to face that. And I mean, we all do, because I currently live in the UK. But there's this denial of consequences of your actions, because for so long, for the last 4 years, they've been told we're awesome. Why wouldn't they want to come and work here? We're brilliant.
When does it break, though? What happens next? Because one thing that the producer and I were discussing this morning is that the newspapers don't have any skin in the game. The newspapers, if Rupert Murdoch makes a phone call now, all of his newspapers can come out saying, oh, well, Brexit's been a bit of a disaster. We need to reverse the bits of it that we can ASAP. And they can just pretend that they never cheerled for it. They can pretend that they weren't the main driver of it. They're not like politicians. So I'm fascinated by what the newspapers are going to do, but more fascinated by what you think the breaking point would be. You can't sustain indefinitely the idea that this has got nothing to do with the root cause of everything. Or can you? No, I don't think you can.
But I mean, listen to what happened last week. Boris said the army would not be deploying fuel. Yesterday, the army started deploying fuel.
Yes.
It's a lie, and it's almost like anything he says is not going to happen. The next week or the next month, that's what's going to happen.
But then he'll say it is going to happen, and everyone will forget that he said it wasn't going to happen.
Exactly.
And he, it's the heads I win, tails you lose school of politics, which is surprisingly seductive, isn't it?
Yes, because it's vitally important to the nation's identity, the ego, the sense of always being right and making the right decisions, that they utterly forgive him and they just accept that he's going to lie to them one week.
It's very hard, as you say, to separate that from the B word, because I fell for Boris Johnson's bluster and bonhomie many moons ago when he was I did when he was running to be mayor of London. I mean, it was a bit of a Hobson's choice, but still, it's an unforgivable scar upon my otherwise perfect political record. But I don't have any. I mean, it was fairly easy for me to go, whoa, hang on, how did that happen? The bloke's a complete menace, and never
could be scammed.
But yeah, well, precisely. But I don't know how. I mean, is it the case that they can't admit the failings of the Prime Minister, such as they are, because to do so would be to admit the failings of the project that propelled him into Downing Street?
To be honest, I don't know when the breaking point is. I keep watching the news, and the BBC seem to be in. It's very hard to watch them at the moment. It's like they're providing you with the information, but they're providing the government spin on it. It's very weird. Just the media in general in Britain at the moment is weird.
I saw John O'Farrell, the author, reporting from New York that everywhere else, I mean, he was talking about America. Everything's been reported. All the problems we're facing are a direct consequence of the B word, but the BBC is cowed or nervous about doing it, and of course the print media is 80 to 90% complicit. So that's what you're seeing from the other side of the Irish Sea.
Yeah, and it is weird. Like, the Irish government has had to come out and make statements based on shortages that you're suffering from. Like that, how weird is that? How strange is it that another nation who happens to be your neighbour has to come out and say, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to have those supply issues. This is the reason. Micheál Martin had to come out and say, these are the steps that we took 4 years ago. We took these steps, and this money was invested into our ports and our transport system because we knew this would happen. He had to come out. There is trust in politics amongst citizens everywhere.
And it's very low here. It's lower than ever here. That's really interesting. Because that meant, of course, that I mean, Michael Martin wasn't the Taoiseach at the time. I don't think, was he? It was Leo Varadkar. But by working on the principle that this was going to have bad impacts, by working on the principle that there were going to be downsides, by working on the principle that there were going to be problems and that the uplands may not be sunlit, you could prepare for it. This is the bit of the conversation, actually, Lorena. I thank you for this, that I haven't remembered to inflate this morning. The bit of it where if you're saying that businesses should have been prepared while being one of the people who spent 5 years at saying everything was not only going to be fine, but it was going to be better than it was before, what should businesses have been prepared for? Whereas in Ireland, the leadership could say, well, this is going to be bad for everybody. You know, the EU never wanted us to leave. This is going to be bad for everybody. Therefore, we need to start getting ready to deal with it. If you're not admitting that it's going to be bad, how on earth can you expect businesses to be ready for it? That's quite an important point, I suspect. I wonder whether that will reach parts that other explanations and analyses have failed to reach. Thank you, Lorena. Priti Patel is about to give her speech. You'll remember it's only 2 years, I think, since she was poised to address conference and reveal that she was about to equip police officers with new, very high-powered tasers. And shortly before she took to the stage, a Tory MP had to be chucked out of the conference for getting violent with a security guard who denied his wife a complimentary muffin. So do keep an eye on proceedings in Manchester for the next few minutes. What are we going to do? How are we going to fix these problems if we are led by people who either deny the problems or deny all responsibility for them? How could businesses have got ready for problems in a country led by people who said there aren't going to be problems? I think that Sunlit Uplands quote of Davis's is crucial. Not Sunlit Uplands, Downsides Upsides quote. Sunlit Uplands was the Prime Minister. There will be no downside. There can be only upsides. So what was business supposed to do? While being called Anyway, Hugh's in Battersea. Hugh, what would you like to say?
James, interesting. My daughter's 18, just back from her first solo expedition around East Europe.
Oh, yes.
Which, any father with a daughter, I did get that phone call at 1 a.m. from her best friend saying, I don't know where Lulu is.
Oh, no.
Anyhow.
She's all right, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be sharing this with the nation.
Yeah, no, she's all right. Good. A lesson learned for her, etc. So she's back, wants to go travelling again. She's very lucky. My daughters live in Northern Ireland, but they have an Irish passport as well as a British passport.
Yes.
Tick, very lucky. She's grateful. She can go and do full ski season as a chalet girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
None of her English friends can, because they can only go for 90 days. Didn't think that one through.
No, the Costa's coming back as well. Like that story's bubbling under. People who are going to have to sell up and change their retirement plans because of that 90-day rule. That's sort of less urgent, I suppose, than the supply chain and the pig cull and the petrol station and the army being brought in and the food rotting in the fields and the turkeys coming over from France.
All the above. I can't believe how many of these people, their homes abroad, middle-aged, blue voters through and through voted for leave, whilst enjoying all the benefits of Spain, France.
It's a crazy business. Ironic, really. Who are you going to blame?
Who am I going to blame? I'm going to go back to... I'm going to blame the individuals and one, the government, two, those who thought it would be a good idea to try and change society by breaking it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
That's the Cummings, isn't it? That's the Cummings angle.
That's back to the Cambridge Analytica. It's the Steve Bannon. It's, Cummings. Let's break it. Don't worry about the result. We'll fob them off. And we'll try.
It's a weird one, that, though, isn't it? Because it ran alongside conservatism. So conservatism with a small c means more or less, let's keep everything as it is. And yet it went hand in hand with that, let's smash everything up and rebuild it. I mean, arguably even more unfairly.
But then I look at, you see, I had the benefit of serving in the military.
Oh, yeah.
So I went 4 years in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. I went to Bosnia. I've been out to Afghanistan. People inherently are people. And all we really want is for a quiet life, to look after our children, to put their head,
that's the weird thing, isn't it? The unnecessary disruption. Can you see any fixes, short-term fixes? I'm told Priti Patel's about to go on a charm offensive to recruit more drivers, so everyone can relax.
There are plenty of drivers. We just want companies who treat them properly.
I hope you're right. Because that, again, it is something that could be fixed, but I don't know that you are. And if all the people that start driving trucks tomorrow, what will happen to the jobs that they are doing today? Hugh, I'm sorry, I squeezed you in at the end. I'm glad that your beloved is back safe and sound from her travels. And, of course, that Irish passport, well, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It allows you to pass through various ports. This government celebrated the fact that it was reducing the number of ports through which you could pass, but at least it's the right colour. Would you believe that I interviewed Boris Johnson once? May even have been more than once. The Evening Standard reported that after the last time I interviewed him, his aides were never going to let him anywhere near me again, but I don't know whether that was true or not. It was certainly what was leaked to the Standard, but it may well be that the Prime Minister himself didn't know anything about it. He wasn't Prime Minister at the time, and it was during a firefighters' dispute in which various manifesto pledges, various promises he'd made while seeking election as mayor had been completely exploded. It was sadly in the days before viral clips. So I don't even know where it is anymore. It was written up a bit, but going back so far now, well into double figures, I think, years-wise. Must have been, mustn't it? But it may well be lost to the mists of time.